So hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're just allowing a few minutes for people to get logged on. But while we're waiting, if you want to get a second device like a cell phone or an iPad, and go to www.menti.com. We'll be doing a brief activity in just a few minutes, and we'll get started in just a few.
Let's go ahead and get started. We have a really full presentation and webinar here for you today, and really want to honor those who are able to get in into the webinar on time today. I'll just kick us off. My name is Martine Watkins, and I am a senior community organizer at the County Office of Education. I want to introduce those who are here with us presenting today. Again, maybe I'll just start by saying you're on a webinar in regards to vaping and really in the age of COVID-19. And this is geared towards parents and guardians and those who have teens in their life, and what you should know about how to support your teenager in this really challenging time. So myself, along with some of my colleagues at the County Office of Education, are here today. So with me is Denise Pittman-Rosas, who's new to the Student Services team. She's a project coordinator and has been in education for many years. We also have Celeste Gutierrez, and she is a student leadership and engagement coordinator, and she's our tech extraordinaire this afternoon. And this is a presentation that we're doing in partnership with our wonderful colleague from the county. We have Tara Leonard, who is an expert from Tobacco Education and Prevention County Health Services Agency. And she's really going to take the bulk of today's presentation to share with you. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and hand it over to Tara to take us away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So Celeste, if you could go to the agenda slide, I'm just going to show you really quickly. I'm not going to read through this, but this is what we're going to cover today. And I just wanted to put this up here to give you a heads up about what we're covering. I want to encourage people to ask questions, but if you want to put your questions into the chat box, we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat box. And if it's a question that we're not going to be addressing, we'll be sure to pop in and answer that. But chances are we might be getting to it somewhere else in the presentation. And then if we still have questions at the end, we'll be going back to the chat box for more. Basically, you can see that there's a lot to cover. So we're going to be moving pretty quickly through the beginning so that we can focus on the stuff that's specific to our current and very unique situation, which is a shelter-in-place situation where many of you are at home with your tweens and your teens, which offer both unique challenges and unique opportunities when it comes to tobacco use. So let's start with an activity that's designed to get your heads back around what it feels like to be a young person. So if you have had an opportunity to go to www.menti.com and put in the code, we're going to see the first couple questions that we'd like you to answer. So it's 76. Oops. There it is, 767418. All right. So I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to fill that out yet, but we can see very clearly what our studies show. The majority of people who start smoking start before the age of 21, and the industry knows that. And so they know that if they get you before you're 21, chances are they're going to keep you for life, which is why it's so important for us to get kids while they're young with our prevention messages. So let's go on to the next question. which is, who were you with the first time that you were smoking? And you can just put in a word, not a name, but like a friend, a parent, a sibling, that sort of thing. So yes, look at that. Again, this is another one of those things that has not changed about tobacco behavior. Friend, friend, best friend, friend at a party. Okay, so what is this telling us? It's telling us that many of the things that were true when those of us were young and first tried tobacco are the same. Kids are still likely under the age of 21 to engage in risk-taking behavior. And when they do so, they're more likely to do them with their peers. So peer pressure is still an absolutely huge element of the tobacco experience. And then final question, how did you feel the first time that you smoked? And by the way, if you're someone that actually has never tried a tobacco product, you can take this opportunity to think about that and maybe what were the reasons you never tried? What were the protective factors that kept you from wanting to try?
Sorry, Tara, I'm having some technical difficulties on this one. I think it says the voting is closed. Is it?
Oh, I think you can only do 2 questions per code. People have to re-enter the code, right?
That's a different code.
Hmm.
But let me see.
Let me see if I can get it if I put in a new code, and then we can just move on. Yeah, if people go back and try that new code, it might have worked. So what is it this time? 24-15-3?
Yeah.
It says it's not open for voting.
Sorry. I think
That's
we're
okay.
gonna
You can move on. Do you want me to just keep going, Celeste? Yeah. So whether or not we had an opportunity to see those on the screen, I think depending on your age, for someone like me whose first opportunity to smoke a cigarette was back when I was in junior high, you coughed, you choked. Maybe the experience was exciting, but it was also kind of gross and surprising. And so part of what's different now is, and if you can just go to the next slide, this is the experience that your kids are now having when they use a vaping product. It's the intersection of the new technology and the flavors. And again, I'm not going to read the whole quote to you, but just this idea of a white spike of nothing, a flavored coolness. So they're not having that initial reaction where you have to kind of push through it to keep smoking. What the flavors and the technology do is they make it a lot easier to start smoking and to continue smoking, because the harshness of that initial reaction is no longer a part of the experience. Okay, so we have the things that are the same in terms of social, but things that are different in terms of the actual product that the kids are using. So Celeste, do you want me to take the screen now?
Yes, please.
Click this timer. So if I click on shared screen, is that how I do it?
No, I just gave you control of my computer.
Oh, great. Let me just double check.
And Tara, while you're working on that, I'm wondering if folks who have questions throughout the presentation feel inclined to put their question into the chat box. It's anonymous. We only have Celeste monitoring those questions, but we hope to get through the full presentation to answer questions at the end. But if something's pressing, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to turn off my video so I can focus on the slides, but you should still be able to hear my voice. So let's start talking about flavors and vaping. Why does a deadly addictive product that's supposed to be for adults look and taste like candy? When I was young, the only flavored tobacco was menthol. But today there are more than 17,000 flavors of e-liquids in the world. Now, why is that the case? And what happened to make that so? Come on. Well, in fact, what happened is that 500,000 people a year die in the United States from tobacco-related illness every single year. And tobacco educators, like the people you see on your screen, were doing a really good job educating both parents and youth about that experience. So fewer and fewer people were smoking. And in fact, in California, several years ago, we had the smoking rate down to about 11%. So the tobacco industry suddenly found themselves needing two things. They needed a new product that hadn't been completely discredited by public health, and they needed a new market. And the new product is, of course, electronic cigarettes and vaping devices. And the new market is your children. So we have to keep in mind that in 2009, the FDA actually banned flavors in cigarettes. And they did that because they knew that the flavorings appealed to youth. But what we saw, because they only limited that to cigarettes, is an explosion of other flavored products. And so many of those other products are on the screen. Not just vapes and e-cigarettes, but little cigars called cigarrillos, the smokeless tobacco and the chew, the hookah, the dip, the snuff. But today we're really going to focus on e-cigarettes because those are the ones that are most popular with youth and really took off in popularity. And before we begin, I want to be clear that everything that we're going to talk about here today is not just my opinion or the opinion of other educators here. It's all based in science and research. And in fact, the Journal of the American Medical Association has shown us that 4 out of 5 kids who use tobacco started with a flavored product. And 97% of youth who vape use flavored e-cigarettes. So we know that when it comes to youth and initiation, they come for the flavors. The flavors are what make it fun. And when you talk to kids, that's what they say. It's all about, oh, have you tried cherry berry and have you tried this new gummy yummy? That's what makes it fun for youth. And we also know from the National Youth Tobacco Survey that this explosion of flavors is not just here in Santa Cruz, not just here in California, but nationwide. And there has been, now remember, I just mentioned that several years ago, the smoking rate in California was 11%. So if you look at this data from high school, the jump in 2017, the high school use of vaping was about 11%. And yet just 2 years later, in 2019, it had jumped to 27.5%, basically wiping out all of the anti-smoking efforts that we had made in the last 30, 40 years. So that's an incredible increase, and that's a real public health disaster. Equally important is the fact that studies show that teens who've tried e-cigs are 4 times more likely to try conventional cigarettes. So in the idea that this is a healthier alternative to cigarettes, which in and of itself is ridiculous, it actually leads to conventional cigarette use. It's not done instead of. And then it's also important for parents to know that teens who use e-cigarettes are more than 3 times more likely to use marijuana later. So whether or not you know right now if your child is vaping a tobacco product or vaping a marijuana product, either way, if they are vaping a tobacco product only now, they're more likely to use a marijuana product later. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later because that comes into play with this scary E-Valley that we saw last fall. So very quick background on what we're talking about. This is the first version of e-cigarettes. They were called the Cig-a-likes. They were designed to look like cigarettes. And frankly, for that reason, they didn't appeal to youth that much because cigarettes were something that their parents used. But this is the basic technology at the time. They had a battery and they had an atomizer coil that heated the liquid that the kids poured in. There was usually some sort of piece of cotton there to hold the liquid, and it created a chemical aerosol that the kids inhale. A year or so later, we started to see the second phase of e-cigarettes. And most of what you're seeing on your screen are called mod pods because you can modify them. You can mix and match pieces and parts and vape tanks. These are not things that most young people are using because, as you can see, they're actually pretty big, which means they're hard to hide from your parents. They also create a really big cloud of vapor. So if you're sitting in a stoplight and you see this huge puff of vapor come out of the car in front of you, chances are that someone using one of these mod pods. And what you see up in the right-hand corner are vaping pens. Those tend to be more often used with a hash oil. adults, or the marijuana. And then what we're mainly going to talk about here today is the third generation. So around 2015, we started to see Juul. Juul is sleek, it's high tech. You can charge it right on your computer, which is what that middle vision is right there. People don't even realize it. And you pop a pre-filled pod into the top of your device. The thing about Juul that made them so dangerous is that they use something called nicotine salts. And nicotine salts more closely resemble the natural structure of nicotine. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds about that, but what it means is that your body more readily absorbs the nicotine, so you get a really quicker, stronger nicotine rush than you would ever get from a cigarette. These caught on so fast, and the advertising used words like discreet, which basically means easy to hide from an adult. And then in the last few years, we've seen more and more of these e-cigarette brands. We're seeing a lot of the Soar and Drop locally. The Vuse Alto is very popular. And right now, the hot product is what you see in the middle here, the Puff Bar. Puff bars are the hot new thing because, get this, they are disposable, one-use e-cig devices, which are exempted from the federal flavors ban that went into effect really in about February or March. So because it's exempt, kids are flocking to these. They cost about $10 a piece. They're super, super poorly made. They're so cheap that kids tell us that about a third of the time, they don't even work. So think about that. You have children inhaling a chemical substance from a product that is so poorly made that a third of the time it doesn't even work. So you can only imagine what else we don't know about this product and what is in it. And these are other things I just like parents to be aware of. E-cig devices don't always look like what you think. So they come in shapes and sizes you can't even imagine. In the top left, you see the Amulet Vape watch. It looks just like anybody's normal running watch, but in fact, the face of the watch pops out and that's actually a smoking device. We have the Vixen Deluxe at the bottom. Now, excuse me, does that look like a smoking product that a grown adult would use to help them quit smoking? Of course not. It's ridiculous. It's completely designed just to hide from your parents. On the upper right-hand side, we have what looks like a cell phone, but in fact, it slides open and it's an e-cig carrying case. And down at the bottom, there's an entire industry around this now, which is vape-ready clothing. So that looks like a normal hoodie, but if you didn't know any better, if the kids actually take what looks like the little pull tabs on the hood, that's a smoking device. They attach their smoking device to those pull tabs so that they're ready to go whenever they want to take a hit. What's completely disturbing to me about the middle images is that there are thousands of what's called wraps or skins that the kids can take to customize their smoke. Okay, that's Snoopy and SpongeBob. Really, and they're not marketing to children? A little bit hard to believe. And sometimes when I do this presentation, parents have a false sense of security that their children aren't involved in these products or their school isn't involved in these products. So I like to put up this slide. These are all electronic cigarette products that were confiscated at a local high school. I'm not going to tell you which one. It honestly doesn't matter because this could be true of almost all of them. And pretty much everything I just showed you is up here. You can see the pod systems, you can see the pens. That little white thing on the far left at the top is a self-contained charger. There's little fluids for refill, and there's rolling paper. So one question is, well, why aren't there any puff bars? I just told you that puff bars are so popular. Well, there's no puff bars because you use them once and then you throw them out. So on top of everything else that is absolutely insane about tobacco products, they are now contributing to an absurd amount of toxic tobacco waste. And studies are being done that look at garbage in local high schools and particularly in their parking lots. And they're seeing an increasing and concerning amount of toxic tobacco waste that's thrown on the ground. These products still contain nicotine residue and other chemical residues, and they are being washed into our storm drains where they are going to poison our groundwater. Why are these products so popular? Well, on top of everything else, The people who run Juul and some of these other products are advertising geniuses. And so they take the same playbook that they've seen from tobacco for over 50 years. You take young people, you make them look sexy, you make them look like they're having a fabulous time, and you tell them that the reason that's happening is because of their cigarette products. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because we have a new and insidious way to market tobacco products now, which is the kids are marketing it to each other. Kids are so involved in social media. They're on their devices 24/7, and the peer pressure to use these devices is with them day and night. I like to show this slide to parents because they're frequently shocked. I don't know if you can see me. If anybody knows what this is, if you see your kids making the symbol, it means J-U-U-L, Juul. On the side here is hashtag do it for Juul. What the kids do is they come up with what's called dare and share. And so they do things like how many Juul can you smoke at the same time, or maybe you can drink and have Juul at the same time. You can do Juul in different situations with different people. If this is completely news to you, I suggest that you log on and you put in the hashtag DI4J and see for yourself what young people are up to around these devices. Why is all of this so concerning? It's concerning because the industry put out information leading people to believe that e-cigarettes were a safe alternative to smoking. Sometimes they said safe, sometimes they said safer. What I have to say about that is even safer is an extremely low bar. Cigarettes are the most deadly consumer product ever invented when used exactly as intended. Okay, exactly as intended. And yet, when you look at e-cigarettes, and this is a slide from the Tobacco Prevention Toolkit, every single one of these chemicals have been found in e-cigarette or vape pen aerosol. You've got your heavy metals, you can see your nickel, your tin, your lead. We like to talk to kids about, well, what's propylene glycol? Well, that's an antifreeze. What is acetone? Acetone is a nail polish remover. So sometimes when kids talk to you about e-cigs being a safer alternative to cigarettes, we like to talk about all of these chemicals and what they're putting in their body, and talk about the fact that your lungs are designed to breathe one thing. They're designed to breathe air. And so then it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that breathing these products is extremely bad for you. So the second part, separate of all of these chemicals, is the nicotine itself. And I think, Celeste, we're going to go to another Menti. Should I go to the next slide? Kids are absolutely shocked at the amount of nicotine that is in e-cig products. So I'm going to ask you, or we're going to ask you on menti.com, how many cigarettes would you have to smoke to get the same amount of nicotine that's in one Juul pod? Is it working? Yeah. So interesting. We have a range, 5 cigarettes, 10 cigarettes, 20 cigarettes, 100 cigarettes. So obviously there's a range of information about this. A few more people are still. So if you as adults are confused about this question, imagine how confused teenagers are. So we like to show them the following slide. Is everybody done? Whoops. Oh, I need to get control back, huh? How many cigarettes would you have to smoke to get the same amount of nicotine as in one Sorin pod? Remember, Sorin is a more recent brand of e-cigarette different from Juul. 5 cigarettes, 10 cigarettes. Someone says 100 again, 50. Okay, so again, quite a range. And that's part of the problem, is that the amount of nicotine in these products varies. So in fact, one pack of cigarettes is 20 cigarettes, and that's about 20 milligrams of nicotine. But one Juul pod is double that amount, 41.3 milligrams of nicotine. So those of you who guessed about 40 cigarettes, that's correct. But look at the far right, Soren. One Soren pod is the equivalent nicotine of 90 cigarettes. I mean, imagine that. Why does this matter? It matters for several reasons. First of all, the kids have no idea they're getting that much nicotine. But second of all, e-cigarettes are different from traditional cigarettes. Traditional cigarettes, if you get interrupted in the middle of smoking a cigarette, you throw it out and that's the end of it. But the way e-cigs work, they only turn on by the action of your breath. So you can take one puff and put it away, put it down your shirt, stick it in your bra. The teacher turns around. You don't get rid of that e-cig device. You just turn it off and you keep smoking it all day long, in between classes, in the bathroom, in the back of the classroom. So you are getting every single bit of the 90 cigarettes that's in one Soren pod. That is a heck of a lot of nicotine for a young body and a young mind. And so that's why we're seeing some of the health impacts that we are seeing. Again. Including what's written on here as Nic-sick. Teachers are having kids that have headaches, nausea, sweating, dizziness, right? Their bodies aren't prepared for that intense rush of nicotine. And again, with the Juul, it's the nicotine salt, so it is a really intense rush. So the immediate impacts, I think, are pretty obvious to all of us. The irritation to the nose, the lungs, the throat, your heart beats faster, right? That's like the whole fight or flight response. We also have this whole second class of injuries, which are the explosion and burn injuries from the very, very cheap batteries like we see in the puff bars. But long term, the truth of the matter is these products haven't been around long enough for us to really know. We know for sure that it creates nicotine addiction because we're seeing that already. But the truth is that your kids are the guinea pigs in this whole activity. We don't know what the long-term damage to your heart and your lungs are going to be, what the problems with learning and memory and mood are going to be. Cancer, lung disease, emphysema. We have early studies that show that vaping does cause inflammation in the lining of the lungs. We have early studies to show that they decrease the ability of your body to absorb oxygen. But these products have not been around long enough, like cigarettes, to have the long-term studies. So your children are the guinea pigs for this industry right now in terms of what's going to happen to them long-term. Come on. It doesn't want to give me. That's funny. All of a sudden, it's not letting me forward the slides. Should we try again? Oh, there we go. And then in the fall, along came vaping-associated lung illness. As if you recall, we were seeing a number of cases of people appearing in emergency rooms with coughing and difficulty breathing, chest pain, fever. The very sad thing was that 68 young people died, including 4 in California. We know more now that the majority of those cases did end up in being involved with vitamin E acetate and people who were vaping marijuana products, but not all of them. There were still a good 10% of these cases that were people vaping only nicotine-related products. So this was a very disturbing turn of events. And what's interesting about it is it was getting a lot of publicity, and then sure enough, along came COVID. And we started hearing less about vaping. It's sort of passed, and some people thought that maybe it was just a phase of products that were you know, not well designed or not well made. But all it does is raise that specter again of not knowing what is in these products or what your youth is ingesting into their body. Now we have a whole new situation with COVID. And the link between COVID and smoking and vaping is, again, something very new because this is a new issue. But we know that COVID is a respiratory illness. And we know that smoking and vaping weaken the lungs, right? They are respiratory. So smoking or vaping damages the lungs, harms the immune system, therefore your body is less able to fight off disease. It doesn't mean that you're more likely to get COVID, but it means that if you do get COVID, your suppressed immune system is less ready to fight it off. So early studies are showing that those who are smokers and vapors, if they have COVID exposure, are higher risk for a more serious level of infection. At the same time, in fact, smoking or vaping may increase your risk of infection because the very act of bringing a smoking device, and therefore your hand, to your mouth over and over and over can transfer the virus. We also know that youth like to share devices, so they could be spreading the virus among users. And obviously, if you're in public, you can't smoke and wear a mask. So the very act of smoking or vaping means that you are breaking two of the social distancing guidelines that have been very clear in terms of protective factors for exposure to COVID-19. Some ERs are so concerned about all of this that they've actually added smoking and vaping to their COVID-19 triage protocol. So when you come into the hospital, they have as part of their questionnaire whether or not you are a smoker or a vapor. And so here we are in this unique moment, like I said earlier, challenges and opportunities. So you're spending a lot of time at home with your kids now, and what that means is that if you have a child who vapes socially, they may stop, they may cut back. They have lack of exposure to their peers. They have lack of exposure to their usual triggers in terms of activities. They also have lack of access to the products. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And lack of opportunity, right? Because they have increased parental supervision and sibling engagement and all of that. However, if you have a youth that is actually addicted, either physically or psychologically, they may really be struggling. This is true both of youth who use vaping to cope with things like anxiety or stress or boredom, but also youth who physically need nicotine and may be experiencing physical and emotional withdrawal. So the number one thing in this unique time is be kind to yourself and to your child. You want to make sure that you're tailoring your messages to their unique situation, and one size does not fit all. Every family is different, every child is different, and every situation is different. So keep that in mind as we go through some of the next slides in terms of signs that your teen may be vaping. These first 6 are always true, of course, cutting back on caffeine, because we find that the nicotine plus the caffeine can really amp people up and cause anxiety and mood swings. So a lot of youth, when they're increasing their nicotine exposure, actually voluntarily just cut back on the caffeine. Increased thirst. Vaping removes hydration from the mouth and the throat. And that's the same as the third one about flavor. When your mouth is dry, you lose flavor perception. And this is actually called vapor's tongue. In the industry, vapor's tongue is used as an excuse to use ever more potent and ever more flavorful e-liquids because it doesn't have the same effect as it used to. And things like nosebleeds and acne, again, they have to do with the drying of the lining of the nose or drying out the skin. And then, of course, a cough. And it can be a dry cough or a cough with phlegm. This set of signs might be more relevant right now as you are home more often with your children, particularly the unfamiliar techie-looking devices. So keep an eye on things like USB drives and cords and cotton balls and battery chargers. You know, what are they for? Where are they? Where are you seeing them? The packages in the mail. A lot of our youth are getting prepaid gift cards from relatives for birthdays, graduations, things like that. They end up using them online to buy tobacco products. So as you're home, make sure you're keeping an eye on the mail. And if you see brown paper packages that aren't clearly marked, just ask your kids what they're getting in the mail. And then the sweet scent, right? We have third-hand aerosol that remains in the clothing, on the hair, the backpack, the furnishings. You might smell that. You might see attempts to mask that scent. So suddenly you're seeing fans or air fresheners or incest or candles. And then always, always with your teenagers, you want to be looking at changes in behavior or grades or their social life. And this is a unique opportunity to have that talk with your teens. You want to take advantage of teachable moments. So maybe you're in the car, you're sitting side by side, so you're not staring right at each other, the intensity is off a little bit. Maybe you're watching TV and someone is smoking or vaping on the program. You don't want to come at your kid with an accusatory statement like, I know you're doing this, or are you doing this? You want to make it more open-ended about, that's interesting. Like, what do you know about this? Or what are you hearing about this from your friends? You might be surprised at how much they know. And then this is your opportunity to counter the misinformation with the facts. I always say to parents, if you don't know the answer to a question, don't make anything up. Your kids have a computer in their hands at any given time called their phone, and they can look things up. And you don't want to lie to them. You want to take that as an opportunity to do some research together. And then that can be a good opportunity to talk about reputable sources of information. Because if it turns out that they're getting most of their information about e-cig devices from an e-cig manufacturer or from YouTube, you might want to hang on and say, maybe what we should do is go to the American Lung Association, or we should go to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and look these things up together. Acknowledging peer pressure, but stressing that most teens do not use e-cigs. It can feel very overwhelming right now, as we talked about, because of social media, to feel like everyone is doing this. But in fact, even with these numbers that we're seeing, the majority of youth still are not using these devices. And then helping them to know their no. We know as parents what our reasons are for not wanting our kids to smoke, but the reasons that we get from the students can be quite different. And one of the most positive ones I've heard is wanting to be a role model to younger siblings. So talking to maybe your 15-year-old about, how would they feel if their 10-year-old started smoking and they said that they did it because they saw you doing it and it looked really cool. Less relevant right now is things like consequences at school or impact on sports, because sadly a lot of those activities are not taking place. But another thing I like to say to parents is it's okay to have a text conversation. You don't have to do this face-to-face. And I know with my daughter, who's now actually 22, we frequently would text back and forth each other in the evenings, even when she was right upstairs in her bedroom. Sometimes that's just an easier way to have this type of conversation. And then it's not going to be something that you talk about one time. You need to keep the conversation going. You need to keep it going, not just throughout shelter in place and this crazy COVID time, but really for the rest of the time that you're parenting. Because this isn't like, well, they're not smoking now, so they're not going to. We're seeing that because of this new technology and these new options, kids are continuing to even try it later and later. So you want to keep the conversation going. And we're going to give you a number of resources to do that. So I think, Celeste, are you going to take the screen back and we'll talk about those?
So sometimes some of this information, and again, I'm Denise, as the project coordinator here. Sometimes this information is really kind of overwhelming and somewhat discouraging. But the good news is that there's so many great resources out there. And so we just want to highlight some of them for you. You can see here the American Lung Association, the Office of Surgeon General, and CDC has really good information about all the things that we covered in detail, but also actually how to talk with your kids about these issues. Really great conversation starters, tips and pointers about how to discuss these things and how to kind of clarify their use in ways that's not going to be confrontational. So we'd encourage you to go there. And before I go too far, I wanted to let you know that you can take a photo of these slides, but you can also put your email in the chat if you'd like a copy of them. Also will be my contact info will be on the last slide, so you can email me. We'll also post all of this on the website. So we want to make sure you guys can access these resources. You can go ahead to the next slide, Celeste. Some more parent resources. Some of these are a little bit more focused on advocacy. So they also have tons of information and just general information, but they also have kind of a focus on advocacy at the state and national level with Parents Against Vaping and the Tobacco-Free California. There's podcasts and videos that you can watch. And sometimes I think that's a good way to talk with your kids about issues as well as, watch a video together and then kind of talk about what your thoughts were about it. And then locally, we have the Santa Cruz County Tobacco Education Coalition, which Tara is representing, and that they have a great website with lots of resources, but also information about kind of locally what's going on. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a few minutes. There's also Become an X, which I'll mention in the next slide, but they do have a support texting option for parents. So you can, that was on that last slide, you can text and get text kind of on a daily or weekly basis, supporting you, helping your child quit. You can go to the next, thank you, Celeste. You can go to the next slide. So we know that, kids don't start using for, it's sort of, they don't use in the same way that adults do, and they're probably not going to quit in the same way. We probably aren't going to see a lot of kids going to like support groups at the Vets Hall. So these organizations have done a really good job at, really kind of focusing really tailoring their cessation programs towards youth and kind of how they can speak their language, and really focusing on, their phones and having these texting and apps. So My Life, My Quit and Become an X through the Truth Initiative have really great websites with tons of information geared towards teens, but I'd also recommend parents take a look at it because it's really informative. They both have texting options there that are listed. The Become an X program is kind of especially interesting because they'll get kind of regular texts from this organization, but they can also reach out, and if they text cope, slip, or stress, then they'll get a text back immediately, and it's peer-based. So it's another teen who's gone through this whole process and is quitting or has quit, and it's a kind of a quote or a tip about how to deal with sort of what they're dealing with in the moment, which I think is pretty great. The California Smokers Helpline has a hotline. They also have the texting option, and they even have an Alexa sort of platform where you say, Alexa, enable stop vaping coach, and you can get some tips there. You can go to the next slide. And then this slide is about Smoke Free Teen. They have a text-based system as well. They also have this app called Quit Start app, and it is free. It actually is really highly rated, and it has a lot of really interesting things. It gives tips on sort of how to manage cravings, how to understand what your individual triggers might be, how to deal with anxiety and depression in healthy ways. They can earn badges when they're making progress. And so it's really, if you take a look at the website, you'll see that it is really geared towards teens. So I think there's a lot that's being offered, which is really helpful. And we know that, ultimately, the best resources that our kids have are really their family and friends. And so I just want to say thank you for all of you to be, participating with us to learn more and be able to help your students or your youth through this. I'm going to pass it over to Martine, who's going to talk a little bit more about sort of the advocacy and work that's being done here locally.
Martine, before you start, this is Tara. Can I just say one more thing about that?
Please.
Particularly during this time, if you're at home with your kids, you also might be in a situation where you can think about this in terms of harm reduction. So not all children are able to quit, just like adults, the first time. And so we've been trying to come up with ways to think about that. And one of the ways to think about that is to treat an e-cigarette or a vaping device as if it were a cigarette. Even though it doesn't have the nasty smoke and the nasty smell, maybe only have an e-cig device if you're willing to step outside, away from the family, away from everyone else. Maybe treat it like a cigarette in the sense that if you get interrupted while you're using it, you stop. That's it. Because if it were a cigarette, you would have to stop. Now, not all parents are comfortable with the concept of harm reduction, and I understand that it depends a little bit on the age of your child and how addicted to these products that they are. But particularly for some older students or students that are, very addicted, harm reduction is better than nothing. And so if you can compromise and meet your kids halfway, at least as a place to start, I would encourage parents to consider that if they're not having luck with any of the quit activities. Youth don't start vaping for the same reasons adults smoke, and they're not going to quit in the same ways that works for adults to quit. So I just want to put that out there as well. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Tara, and thank you, Denise, because we absolutely want to support our youth who are ready to either slow their intake or quit altogether. But more importantly, we want to stop them from accessing these products to begin with. And we want to also limit their ability to get hooked. So one of the things that I can say that I'm really proud about is that the city of Santa Cruz, along with the county of Santa Cruz, the city of Capitola, and then most recently the city of Watsonville, have all taken steps locally to ban the sale of flavored tobacco. And that is huge, because what we know is that the federal flavors ban really had major gaps in that. Although it banned the sale of pre-filled flavored cartridge-based nicotine products, it didn't include menthols. It did not include refillable devices or tanks. It did not include disposable devices, which are the puff bars we saw, and it does not include other flavor products, as well as the California state ban not covering what was in the federal ban. It's still under debate at the state level. So absent federal and state leadership on this topic, local communities have really rose to the occasion to really limit our youth's access to getting their hands on these products. And one thing I will add is the Scotts Valley jurisdiction was in the process of exploring a ban. And right around the time that we went into the shelter in place is when they were supposed to have that on their agenda. And so now that we're starting to see more policies that were sort of more prioritized earlier on coming back onto council agendas, we will hope to see that on the city of Scotts Valley's upcoming agenda to really round out our entire county for banning flavored tobacco in our communities. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we wanted to just share with you briefly, and then we want to obviously save some time for some questions, is you know, we are constantly evolving, and unfortunately policy and programming is often responding to what is already a challenge. And so we now are working on trying to support kids who are hooked, and we want to do so in a way that's going to really move the needle to getting them to prevent and also supporting each other. You know, as Tara had mentioned, you know, these efforts really have been designed primarily from the perspective of long-term smokers, whether it be cessation work, but why the reasons they've gotten hooked on cigarettes in the first place are really different than youth. And so we're constantly evolving. And most recently, the Stanford Tobacco Toolkit put out a youth advisory opportunity, and it's called Youth Speak, and it's staying healthy and strong during these uncertain times. And it's really geared towards youth for youth. And as you can see, it's quoted saying attendees will interact with their peers on the subject of coping during sheltering in place, understanding why youth may use e-cigs as an unhealthy coping strategy, and considering using healthy coping strategies as practiced by the YAB members. And that we can give you more information about as well, but it's coming up on Tuesday, June 23rd. And that's the next slide. All right, and this is just our last slide, and as you can see, there's some contact information. Tara and Denise and our team, we're constantly learning, and we're ready to continue to evolve and adapt to support our community. We wanted to start with parents knowing that you're home with your teens at this time, and it can be really challenging. We want to eventually see if this would be something we would want to do in Spanish for our monolingual Spanish-speaking community, as well as looking at more targeted presentations for teachers, educators, and youth themselves. So we appreciate this group being our first group. This was all our first webinar, so thank you for experimenting with us. And I will go ahead and see if there were any questions that we wanted to ask the participants, if they want to speak now to, and or if there's any questions that came into the chat that we want to address at this time.
And if you think of something later, feel free to call me. That's my direct line at the office. That's 831-454-5412, and I'd be happy to speak with you individually.
And thank you so much, Tara, for your time today. This is really great.
There aren't any questions in the chat, and everyone who sent me your email address, we will be sending you the slideshow, and we'll also be posting it on the website. If there are any questions, please feel free to post them on the chat. I'm the only one who can see the question, and then I'll be reading your question out loud. There is a question. What kind of presentations are currently happening in the middle schools?
Well, right now, nothing's happening at any schools, I'm afraid. We are trying to get our ducks in the row, and I'm sure Martine can talk about that more with the two-pay program. We're trying to see what type of model the schools are going to be using in the fall, if it's going to be a hybrid model, if they're going to be in the classroom, if they're going to be at home part-time. We just don't know. And because of that, we don't know how much curricular time is going to be available for things like this. So it's a big wait and see right now. But Martine can talk about what it normally does.
Yeah. Well, actually, a lot of the programming has been geared towards the older youth in high school. And most recently, I'd say in the past, maybe year and a half, we've started to see curriculum come about that's really targeted towards vaping. Most of the curriculum have been targeted towards smoking or other traditional kind of tobacco use. That is actually going to be appropriate for middle-aged school students. The one that we've found as really just sort of the most adaptable and I guess I'd say just sort of technologically savvy curriculum is the Stanford Tobacco Toolkit. That toolkit is available online, and I want to let the participants know that that actually is the presentation we hope to hold for our next webinar, really specifically diving into that, so that educators are able to access modules and other tools on there in terms of what they've found to work for their middle school students. And those tools, now that we're in sort of this hybrid model, could be potentially used during the shelter in place and the hybrid distant online learning. But ideally, when we're back with a regular school schedule, we'll have the teachers supported and prepared and supported with other capacity through the COE to actually go ahead and implement a lot of the modules within the toolkit. The one thing I would just also add to that is a lot of that is around understanding the vaping, but a part of it's starting to evolve is to also incorporate conversations around vaping tobacco. Vaping cannabis and the mixture of cannabis and tobacco, but also healthy choices and alternative to suspension expulsion. And what do you do as an educator if you catch students using on your campus?
Mm-hmm.
And there's more information about that online on the COE's website under the two-pay tab.
Can I add something, Martine? That was my question about what's happening in the middle schools, because I know my daughter was just graduated from New Brighton, and the police department actually came and did a presentation there for parents. And I asked the same question. I said, are we not giving this information to our students? Because really, they need to know. I mean, it's good for us to know, but they need to understand it as well. And I really feel like 5th and 6th grade is the time to do it, right? You get in there, you start giving them, before they get all the peer pressure to go and do things later on, at least giving them some of those tools. So I would encourage that as well, looking at those age groups.
Thank you for saying that. And I think, we're hearing now, it's just been so fast, the rise of vaping for our young people. It's been really horrifying to see how many youth are using, to be quite honest with you. And our educators are asking for help and wanting to see it prioritized. The challenge with the curriculum in the past, it just didn't resonate with the kids today because of the way it was geared with fidelity, speaking education terms, towards really traditional smoking. So thankfully, we have actually good curriculum coming out to hopefully support our educators in the younger years for their students.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's a question.
Please.
There's actually a comment and a question that PVPSA has been presenting prior to COVID to those groups in Watsonville area, to the middle schools. And then, so thank you to PVPSA. And then there is a question, is there any data to suggest that e-cig usage is increasing due to self-medication as a result of shelter in place?
Gosh, the traditional tools for measuring student use have been the California Healthy Kids Survey, which is conducted every other year. But that said, I wouldn't be surprised if there are other surveys that are going out to people throughout the nation in regards to usage. I know that they are tracking, for example, to alcohol use increasing in sales and such. So, but I don't have that information offhand. Tara, do you have more information about that?
I don't, but I have seen the same study I think you're referring to about increased alcohol use.
Right.
So on the one hand, it wouldn't be surprising. On the other hand, we have this unique situation where kids aren't around their peers as much because of distancing. So it would be a question of access. So if they are accessing them online, or if they're accessing them from an older sibling, they might still have that access. But no, I haven't seen any studies on it yet.
One of the other concerns we had is that after these bans go into place, if we already have an addicted youth population, will they then turn to other traditional ways of getting nicotine and tobacco? So we were sort of talking about, now, are we going to see tobacco smoking rates rise again? And so we're trying to track those so we can be prepared and agile.
Yeah, that's why it was so important when we put through the flavors ban to include even menthol cigarettes, because we didn't want to drive youth from the flavored e-cigs to a menthol cigarette. So that was a really critical part of that policy to get through.
That's right. Are there any other questions?
So once again, no, there's no other questions, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm the only one that's able to see them. Or if you'd like a copy of the slideshow, please enter your email address, and we'll also be posting it on the COE website.
And also on the COE website is links to our county partners' information and other tools that are available for you to explore as well. Are there any other last comments from folks? No?
3:58, we did it perfectly.
we were worried we weren't going to cover it all, but you did a great.
I apologize for talking so quickly, but we got it all in.
It's great. No, it's great. Thank you so much. Well, we're definitely open to feedback. We hope this is first of many, and we do want to continue to be able to provide information to our parents, our teachers, our educators, and our students, so that way we can support our community being as healthy as possible. And we know you're all very busy, and we appreciate your time on this June afternoon. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Tara, for your time and partnership.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye, everybody.